read the words "not guilty," it echoed across the country where this trial has raised many questions about race and the justice system. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, a longtime trial lawyer himself, had this to say when asked about the verdict on Meet the Press.
I don't always agree with what the jury does, but that's a system, and I support this system. Now, I may feel differently, but I wasn't sitting as a juror or a prosecutor or defense attorney, so I'll accept the verdict and take a look at the law that they have in Florida that is so unusual.
The senator there referring to Florida's Stand Your Ground law. And joining me right now from Washington is the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Ohio Congresswoman Marcia Fudge. It is nice to have you with me, Congresswoman. Thanks for your time. And I want to start off with saying we brought you on because you had the opportunity and talk about meeting with the president this past week. But since we have the verdict now of the George Zimmerman trial, what is your reaction to what we all know and what questions we all might have as a country now?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I am certainly disheartened and troubled by the decision. But I have to say that he was found not guilty. Mr. Zimmerman was found not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. He was not found innocent. So all of the facts I think that I know, that I'm aware of, is that there was a young man walking in his neighborhood, walking to his house, unarmed, and someone decided that he looked suspicious. And now Mr. Trayvon Martin is dead, and what I could see of the trial, they put him on trial, not Mr. Zimmerman. They put a young black boy on trial for being in his own neighborhood walking home from the store.
So as we look at this, though, to have to accept it judicially as a country, the outrage is from a social perspective, and it's not socially acceptable that this happened. So how do we take this and make a better change and utilize this as a way to shore up major fractures within our society?
Well, I think that there are a number of things. I think certainly that I can't say that I believe that the judicial system is biased, but I believe that those who apply the law and interpret the law often are biased. And I think that that's what you may have seen in this particular instance. And clearly, beyond a reasonable doubt is a very high threshold to meet, especially if the only witness you have is the person who pulled the trigger. I think that we have to find a better way of making sure that profiling stops in this country. We also have to find a way to keep people like Mr. Zimmerman from having guns. We also have to make clear to people that not only did Mr. Zimmerman have the ability to stand his ground and to protect himself, so did Trayvon Martin. He is being followed by someone. He has a right to stand his ground as well. I think Florida has some very serious issues as it relates to this law, and I think that they are not even-handed in the way they dispense justice. Just in Florida, in Jacksonville, very recently, a young mother who fired a warning shot into the air after she was being attacked by her husband. Into the air. No one was injured. She received a sentence of 20 years in the same state. She couldn't hold her ground. That says to me that there is a difference in the way we dispense justice between those who are African American or poor or minority than others.
That same woman had a protective order against her husband as well because of abuse suffered through that marriage in the past. So a lot of questions surrounding that, but I do want to, we have to meet the promise of getting you on to talk about the meeting that you had with the president. So if you'll forgive me, I want to shift gears with you because, as I did mention, you are the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and in the past the CBC has been critical of the White House's efforts, specifically the president's efforts on African American unemployment as it now stands at 13.7%. In this meeting with the president, did that come up? And if so, how did he address it with you?
Indeed, it did come up. We talked about jobs. We talked about education. We talked about a lot of things that affect not just the black community, but poor, underserved, and minority communities across this country. He talked with us about his plans for education going forward. He talked with us about his plans to try to get some kind of a jobs plan in place. And we had a lot of good discussion about a lot of issues that we think confront our communities, in particular poverty. Poverty is a major issue in this country, and we have to find a way to focus and address it. We talked about making sure that we can direct funding to communities who are in most need, whether it be training dollars, education dollars, things that can help lift those communities out of some of the situations they find themselves in today. So all in all, I think we had an excellent meeting.
Were you also...
And let me just be clear, Thomas. We have disagreements with many presidents, not just this one. It is important to us to fight for the people we represent. And so we are fighting for our people every day.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You are elected, you know, to
Exactly
ask
right.
truth of power. So let me ask you about this. With the Supreme Court striking down the provision in the Voting Rights Act, did that come up? And did he offer suggestions for how to ensure that ruling doesn't set back minority voting in states?
The topic did come up. We discussed it at length, but it wasn't so much the president offering suggestions, it was the Black Caucus offering suggestions as to what we think can be done through the Justice Department, what we think can be done through Congress. Because if you understand the ruling, the Supreme Court basically put the ball back in the court of Congress. And so we are talking about how we can make the necessary changes so that we can once again enforce Sections 4 and 5 of the Voting Rights Act. But we also talked about Section 2 and 3. We talked about what the Justice Department can do. So there were many things that we believe are achievable in the near future. So it was more us coming up with suggestions than the president.
Congresswoman